versus Arman Tsarukyan 1 was the first part of their saga, an unplanned fight. Islam Makhachev at the time was scheduled to fight in Russia, but the UFC understandably couldn't find a fighter who wants to fly out to Russia on short notice from the roster. So they looked outward, a fighter close to the region from Armenia. They found Arman Tsarukyan, a fighter with a good record and willing to step up on short notice to defeat the future champion Islam Makhachev. Islam at the time didn't even know who Arman was. He'd never seen his fights before. He didn't understand Arman's skills at the time, because Arman turned out to be one of the most difficult fights in Islam's entire career. Not only had the abilities to scramble and grapple with Islam, but even became the first fighter ever to get a takedown on Islam. Defended and reversed many positions in the grappling that Islam is still using to dominate fights today. That was not the last time he would see Arman Tsarukyan, and he'd be taking part in a rivalry between two of the best fighters in the world at the lightweight division. This is a chess match between two great grapplers, and you're going to see a lot of countering from both fighters. Islam will do something, Arman will counter that, then Islam will counter that counter, and it just keeps going back and forth throughout the whole fight. So many adjustments. Islam will land a technique, Arman would then adjust to it, fixing that mistake, winning certain exchanges, and vice versa. And you see that right in the beginning of the fight. Both fighters are in opposite stances. Arman is orthodox, Islam is southpaw, and Arman is constantly moving out to his left side while hand-trapping the lead hand of Islam, barricading it from being used to stop his movements. But it's also used as a measuring stick, moving in and out while constantly moving out to the left side, touching the lead hand of Islam, and Islam looks to counter that with an open stance kick. But the measuring lets Arman feel the range to disengage, even though the kick nearly lands. It whips up the hair of Arman, gets very close on landing. Now, there's a point of this fight where he goes a step forward and steps wrong, almost rolls his ankle and falls to the ground. I don't know if he ever got injured from that. I don't remember any kind of medical report if Islam has some kind of injury to his ankle after or something. But then strangely enough, Arman falls over as well after throwing a roundhouse kick to the leg. But that begins the first grappling exchange between the two. Islam pressures forward and pushes Arman up against the fence, working for his takedown. Now, he doesn't really know much of Arman Tsarukyan. This is something he said now, right? He didn't know who he was back then. He didn't know how good he was in certain areas. He just accepted the fight against a short notice opponent. But Arman turned out to be a much better wrestler than not only his opponent thought, but the MMA world thought. So you see he has double underhooks. That's going to allow him to hold on to some control in the clinch. But he also moves his shoulder past Islam's head to create counter pressure, because you see how Islam is leaning his body weight into Arman, his shoulders up against Islam's head. Well, he wants to get that shoulder past Islam's head into Islam's chest or shoulder area, so he can also hold some pressure as well. It's gonna strengthen that underhook. Then instead of running Islam backwards, using his strength to push Islam, he sidesteps to move the leverage on an angle. He's misdirecting the pressure of Islam. This is something he does constantly throughout the fight. It's a very good defensive technique using footwork in the clinch. He's not going strength for strength, but instead moving that clinch pressure, misdirecting it while holding onto the double underhooks. He sidesteps, pivots, and sidesteps again to get away from the fence, and also rotating the entire clinch to where now he's able to push Makhachev back. Didn't do it with strength, it was all technique. And there's a difference of the way that Islam is moving in the clinch. He's taking one step at a time, trying to push Arman, using more of his strength. But then look at their position. That was a good defensive technique, but now that he's on the offensive, right, he has to be the one that pushes Islam up against the fence. He doesn't really have the use of a sidestep here, which causes him to get stuck in a positional advantage, allowing Islam space to use his strength. You can see how he fakes like he's gonna go for an inside trip with that left leg. He brings it forward, and then Arman brings his left leg back to avoid any kind of takedown from Islam Makhachev. But this allows Islam to get Arman closer to the fence, rotating their position again. This is the first sets of counters between these two fighters. But then Arman returns to sidestep. Islam, though, counters that with a single collar to cut off that right movement. Look how Arman's trying to move out to the right. Islam lets go of that left overhook and uses it as a single collar so he can pull Arman in front of himself. But Arman was one step ahead. He counters Islam's counter with a single leg, throwing Islam off guard. Look how quickly he lets go of that single collar once Arman goes in for the takedown. That's not the usual for Islam. Fighters don't usually try to take him down, but Arman was able to push Islam up against the fence. But to stop this single leg, Islam frames his shin on Arman's body while controlling his wrist and grabbing onto a left overhook. He is stopping Arman from advancing the takedown. So all Arman could do from there is hold on to the takedown or return it back to the fence, in which he does. Islam was able to counter that skillfully, but he's again going for the single leg, and Islam is pushing down on his head, again trying to stop the advancement of the takedown, but Arman shows his strength there. He rises his head, through the hand and grabs that single leg high, which Islam was able to balance himself. Get back to the fence, and Arman bails on the takedown. Another good counter from Islam Makhachev. Not only showing that he has great technique to stop a takedown, but even very good balance in case he has to rely on that in certain moments. Obviously, relying more on technique is better, but there are certain exchanges like there where he has to balance himself and show his athleticism in those moments. But they get into the clinch, and look at the difference in their directional pressure. So a lot of the pressure in clinches is relied on which way the fighter is facing and leaning, right? If they're leaning forward, they're going to be able to push their opponent backwards easier than if they're like leaning to the side, right? It's harder to push someone back if you're leaning to your right side. Well, Arman's leaning to his right side, and Islam is leaning forward. So naturally, Islam is going to have the strength advantage to push Arman back, which allows him to get Arman to the fence, which then Arman sidesteps again to get away from the fence, which he does successfully, and then combos that to reach in for the leg. Look with his right hand, he's trying to grab onto the leg of Islam, but the left underhook is held very strong by Makhachev, defending that attack successfully. And Arman learns from this exchange. So he made two different moves there in combination. One of them was successful, one of them failed. So he learns from that and goes to the thing that he was successful with and then builds on top of that. So he again sidesteps away from the fence in the same angle as well, the exact same direction to his left. But this time without an attack, he doesn't reach for the leg, he doesn't go for a takedown or anything. He just focuses on getting away from the fence, but Islam was one step ahead. In fact, he was like multiple steps ahead. He makes some like chess grandmaster move, those kind of chess moves where the guy's like 4 steps ahead and beats you. He establishes an attack instead of Arman. He throws a knee to the body, which gets blocked. This naturally gets a counterattack in response. You see this so many times. If a fighter throws a leg kick, the opponent usually likes to throw their own leg kick and one up each other, right? You see this so many times with many different techniques. And with a fighter who didn't really have much of a training camp, he's fighting a lot on his instincts and reflexes and stuff like that. So the natural response of countering with the same move is going to be even more probable after Islam throws that body knee. And Arman does it. He throws a knee as well. And Islam times that returning knee perfectly and trips out Arman's support leg at the same time. Before his foot is able to retract back to the ground, Islam is already taking him down and lands into full mount. What a move from Islam Makhachev. He slides into that Habib leg wrap, but in the center of the cage instead of the familiar leg wrap against the fence. Arman counters this though. He's one of the few fighters in UFC history to counter that leg grab so emphatically. A lot of people miss this. He counters it by pushing the knee down so he can pull his right leg out slightly and push up Islam's left leg with both of his. So 2-on-1 with 2 of his legs pushing up Islam's left leg, elevating him. You could say this is kind of like a double butterfly hook, but on the same side. Islam tries to return on top, and Arman pushes that same side double butterfly hook again. Islam counters this time by straightening out his leg. Every move Islam makes, Arman counters. Then Islam counters him, and back and forth it goes. Such a high-level grappling match, man. And notice how Islam is keeping his leg straightened, but Arman counters this by using 1 butterfly hook instead of 2. This is because he wants to carry Islam in one direction. If he uses 2, he's pushing him upward. If he uses the right butterfly hook alone, he's able to carry Islam at an angle, allowing himself to rotate into a whizzer. Amazing combination from Arman Tsarukyan. And notice how he grips onto Islam's right forearm to rise up using that right whizzer. But wherever there's a whizzer, there's going to be an underhook. And Islam counters Arman with his underhook because he has the top position and he's leaning on him as well, reversing Arman's grip with his own. Now he's grabbing to Arman, using this to keep top control while Arman stands up. And after he does, Islam flips Arman back to the ground off of the headlock, but Arman was faster to roll on top, but Islam still got up and pushed Arman up against the fence. Now this is very interesting. Arman is leaning to his right over that underhook. Look how his head is like hanging over that arm, baiting Islam to throw a knee, but he throws the high knee, which Arman timed perfectly, grabbed onto it, trying to take Islam down. But Islam balances himself, hand posted on the ground and left foot up high on the fence and rebounds to the ground, countering Arman's counter takedown creatively. But this sacrifices a potential back take. Arman grabs onto the back, controlling the position. Islam fights to get Arman off his back into a front body lock instead. Arman then surprisingly goes to strength instead of technique. He lifts Islam off of his feet. Arman elevates him and drags Islam to the ground. Islam quickly fighting for a whizzer to hold some kind of control in that position. Not just to give up the takedown to Arman, he's gonna fight for it at every single step. Arman though counters the whizzer, using it as a lever by pushing into it. So look at Islam's left overhook. Arman is pushing his body into that side. And you can look at that arm as if like it's a lever. You know, you're pushing into it, the lever is going to activate and rotate Islam using that momentum. Arman drives forward and Islam rotates again, gets into his base, accepting that he has been taken down for the first time in his career. Islam was outplayed in the grappling for the first time. Amazing stuff from Arman Tsarukyan. Islam, though, tries to hit the switch, but Arman flows with it, keeping his position on top. And you see this from Arman in this fight. Whenever he has like some dominant position or in some kind of advantage in the grappling, he kind of gets stuck. He doesn't know how to advance in certain positions. So very risky. He pulls Islam on top of himself. So his back is on the ground. And by hooking onto the leg of Islam, he tries to rotate on top, but Islam posts his arm on the ground to counter, while Arman is still holding on to the body lock. Islam understands the hard battle of fighting out of Arman's grip, so he walks to the fence and uses it defensively when he usually uses the fence offensively. He's able to stand up along the fence and focus on fighting the grip while leaning his weight on the fence to hold him up in case Arman tries to take him down again. Then they get to an over and under clinch again, where they both have an underhook, they both have an overhook. It's like a 50-50 position. But look at the difference in how they use their footwork in the clinch. It's like what I talked about before. Islam is walking, taking one step at a time to drive his opponent backwards. More emphasis on strength, whereas Arman hops with his side steps, throwing off that forward drive of Islam. This is why Arman usually wins these quote-unquote tests of strength, because he simply doesn't just use strength. He relies on his footwork. He relies on better technique in controlling the clinch. Let's say, for example, like someone's pushing you backwards with their hand. What happens when you step to the side quickly? The person will stumble forward. Arman is using that same dynamic, but in the clinch. This is why Islam is usually the one who ends up closer to the fence until Islam adjusts. So as you can see, we're like 4 minutes into the first round, and in almost every single clinch exchange, Arman has been able to reverse Islam. But again, the sidestep is a defensive move. Once they get to a position where Arman is now pushing Islam to the fence, he's the offensive. He can't use the sidestep anymore to push, and Islam starts to push Arman back from there. And while he's pushing him back, Arman tries a sidestep again. This is where Islam adjusts. He's had enough of the sidestep, so he trips it out. Islam puts out that left foot, trips him out, gets him to the fence. So that was a good adjustment from Islam, but Arman was able to return to it to get away from the fence again. Sidesteps without Islam countering it this time. And again, now that Arman is in a position to push forward, Islam overpowers him slightly. Arman throws a knee to the body and instantly reacts as if Islam was going to trip him just like he did before. Remember the other time where Arman threw a knee to the body and Islam tripped him out? Look how he reaches at the left leg of Islam with his right hand and brings his own left leg back, defending both sides of getting tripped by Islam. Arman learns very quickly in this fight, but then Arman starts to be the one who uses strength to push Islam back. But then there's a reversal of the roles. Arman is the one pushing Islam back using his strength, but Islam is the one who sidesteps to misdirect the pressure. The exact opposite of what both fighters have been doing for the first round. Islam learned from Arman learned from Islam, and now they're both using their skills against each other. Arman did not like that. He did not like seeing Islam sidestep. He goes and throws an overhand as a counter, but hits Islam's neck with his wrist. Islam's able to take the shot. He has a single collar and pulls Arman's head down into an uppercut. Then in the second round, Islam feints and tries to land a high kick. Arman made a mistake of dropping his hands, as if it was a body kick, but he was quick enough to raise his right hand to partially block. Still, a lot of impact goes through the hand onto Arman's head. Then Islam goes to snap down Arman, bringing him to the ground, but Arman was able to slip out his right arm and follow his head behind it, hooking over Islam's back. He stands up and rotates at an angle, getting out of Islam's grip and lands an overhand off of the disengagement. And then Arman tries to time a takedown as a counter to Makhachev's step-in jab. So as they're in opposite stances, Islam tries to step on the outside the lead foot, angling to his right, setting up off of his jab. And Arman shoots a takedown under it, but the shot gets misplaced because Islam took an angle instead of moving straight forward on a straight line. Arman has to redirect his shot after creating contact. Look how he has to reposition himself at a leftward angle. This gives Islam enough time to shift for a whizzer and pull Arman off of his hips upward. This is how good footwork counters a well-timed takedown shot. They're in the clinch, both have an over and under. In kind of that 50-50 position, you can see how Islam is pressuring with his shoulder more. His upper body is leaned into Arman. Islam is much better positioned in the clinch to drive the opponent backwards or just to use his strength naturally compared to Arman's technique. And with the difference of position there, Arman has his legs closer to Islam. He's standing straighter up tall compared to Islam, who's keeping his legs away from Arman. So both fighters can trip each other. Both fighters can go for takedowns like that. Arman's putting himself in a position to get tripped out easier than Islam. So Islam steps forward with his right leg. This could have made Arman react to a potential knee, so Arman raises his own knee to guard himself. But you already know what Islam does. Give up a leg and he will trip you on your face. But Arman impressively breaks his fall and springs up. But Islam is on to the next technique. He attacks with a single leg, turning the corner, but Arman athletically keeps his balance. They're up against the fence. Arman is defending and attacking Islam with the Kimura grip on that left arm. So if Islam tries to go for the takedown, Arman will try to submit him or reverse him with that Kimura. But Arman forgot about something. Islam just doesn't care. He pulls Arman off of the fence and drags him to the ground, regardless of the Kimura grip. He's not fazed by it at all. And he defends the Kimura on the ground, securing the top position after Arman's attack of the Kimura for 30 seconds. And Islam hops out of the guard into side control very easily. Arman goes to shrimp into Islam, but gets countered by Islam's wrist control, using that to pull upward, straightening out Arman's posture. But Arman was able to fight the grip off, reverses Islam with a rising single leg, chains that into a knee tap, but Islam arm drags him out of the grip, crashing into the cage. High level stuff from both fighters. Arman got very ambitious for a low single leg and gave Islam too much space to move with. One simple sidestep turned their positions around, and now Arman is fighting for a takedown while he's against the fence. You don't normally see a position like that. Usually it's the fighter shooting a takedown and pushing the opponent against the fence. Arman's back is to the fence and he's going for a takedown because of the way that Islam was able to reverse him. Then in the third round, Arman gets reckless with an overhand, but Islam is a counter puncher first when it comes to striking. He blocks the overhand and counters with his left hand, not the most powerful shot, but then Arman nearly leans directly into a high kick. A slight adjustment on Islam's precision could have won him a devastating knockout. Arman literally leans into the kick, but Islam lands on the chest. And throughout this round, Arman was trying to land the high kick, but every single time, Islam was able to block it. There was a nasty elbow from Arman in the clinch. He landed this a few times throughout the fight because Islam is constantly trying to wrist control. He's grabbing onto the right wrist of Arman, and Arman just rolls his elbow over it. Beautiful shot from Arman. But Arman, by this point, started to get tired, and Islam had a much easier time taking him to the ground with a traditional takedown. He didn't have to trip him in the clinch or get some kind of flashier takedown that's much more advanced. Just an easy, simple, traditional takedown gets Arman to the mat. But Arman was able to walk up the cage, get back to his feet, and he tries to step across both of Islam's legs and flip him over. But Islam has very good eyes. He sees it and steps his own right foot on the outskirts of Arman's, defending that takedown. And Islam overpowers Arman, pulls him into the fence again. You can see Arman is visibly very tired. He took the fight on short notice, and Islam gets another easy takedown and leg wraps him up against the fence, just like Khabib used to do, to ride that round to a decision. Extremely highly technical fight between these two, mostly in the grappling, right? The striking was good, but it wasn't like what we see from them now. You know, they're much better strikers now. Back then, though, they were elite grapplers, and that has improved from both. The two best grapplers in the lightweight division. Charles Oliveira is there as well, but it's going to be a very interesting fight in the rematch. Arman was the only fighter back then that was able to grapple with Islam Makhachev, and we get to see how much better he has gotten. Can he get to the point where he has surpassed Islam in the grappling? So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. If you guys did, make sure to give the video a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.